some of the infrastructure challenges facing Park Royal. Are we going to turn down the lights a bit at the front? I don't know if that's possible.
Lights down?
Yes, I think that'd be good, just so we've got a clear view of the screen. I should have said when I kicked off the morning that given the time constraints, rather than introducing in great detail all of our speakers, we've circulated their bios for you. So please do have a read of all their fascinating backgrounds and huge amount of expertise that they're bringing to the conversation this morning. Without further ado, it's my great pleasure to welcome and introduce you to Andrew Camping from BT. Thank you.
Right, good morning, everyone. Let's just see which button to press. Fantastic. So I was asked to talk about fibre broadband infrastructure more generally in the Park Royal area. I'll happily take questions later on anywhere further afield if anyone's not based specifically here, and I will cover the three local boroughs briefly. Now, firstly, just to give a sort of a sense of context in terms of the level of fibre broadband available across London as a whole. Because if you listen to some of the politicians, read some of the press, and it's worse than your sort of best third world country. Whereas in actual fact, and I don't expect you to read the detail on this, apart from a small number of areas of central London, there's actually already very high availability of fibre broadband across the whole of London. And to a large part, the lower availability in central London is partly a function of previous planning decisions taken by the relevant local authorities, which I think it's safe to say have since revisited those decisions in the light of pressure from their residents and businesses. So to give you a sort of a general overview, depending on network provider and how you measure it, across all operators, availability is already over 90% of premises in London. I'll show you the latest stats in just a second. It is continuing to increase and should hit around 95% of premises. That's a mixture of obviously business and residential premises across the whole of Greater London. Over the next certainly 18 months, probably slightly less than that. If I look specifically at the Openreach network, current expansion in sort of Brent, Ealing and Hammersmith and Fulham will add around 18,000 more premises over that period. And obviously there are other networks also providing service within the three boroughs and further afield in West London. Speeds are continuing to increase depending on the technology that's being used. Currently, speeds for the majority of the technology are download speeds of up to 80 megabits. And on that technology, the speeds will increase probably to download speeds of up to about 500 megabits over the next year or so, and then with deployment beyond then. And then for newer technologies, the speeds are going even faster. So depending on how you're connected, there are high speeds available and they are getting higher. But it's worth just highlighting that people tend to get fixated on broadband and overlook that for London as a whole, we have world-class connectivity for businesses, business-grade services, already available to any premises anywhere in London. An example I always use is if you've got an allotment shed somewhere in the middle of Ealing, if you decide you want a 100 gigabit business grade connection to that shed, you can indeed have it. I've no idea why you would want 100 gigabits to your allotment shed, but that's available to any premise if required. The business grade services are far more resilient and more suited to medium and larger businesses than broadband services. They're obviously also more expensive, although in terms of to get a price comparison, some of the faster services, depending on service provider, will cost you from the equivalent of about 3 or 4 large coffees a day from your favourite coffee shop. So although they're more expensive than broadband, they're not ridiculously expensive, certainly for a medium-sized business. And if you're in a very data-centric business, I would certainly suggest that you have a look at that to get the better resilience and reliability. So to give you the very latest stats, these are sort of current statistics for earlier this month. Independent, so they're from a site called Think Broadband, which looks at all of the data for all of the different network providers. So for London as a whole, just under 94% of premises currently have access to superfast broadband speeds. So that's defined as speeds of better than 30 megabits, that's download speeds. That's not to say that all of the people in all of those premises are using those services, but they're available should they choose to take advantage of them. If I look just very quickly at the three sort of local boroughs, in Brent, availability is actually higher than the London average, currently at 96.5% of premises. And then just quickly, even more than that in Ealing, 96.9% of premises. And then finally, slightly lower in Hammersmith and Fulham, but at 91.6% of premises. As I say, that's taking all different network providers and doesn't take account of what people are actually using. It's simply giving a view of what's available should they choose to use it. Which begs the question, so how would you know if fibre broadband is available to your home or business premise? Well, if you're on the OpenReach network, then if you put your phone number or postcode, and then there'll be a drop-down menu with the list of premises and the postcode, then it will tell you whether it's available to your address currently or if it's due to come in the next few months. You'll need to use your imagination because this is a slide, not a website. If it was available today, then this box would be shaded. If it was part way through delivery, then one of these boxes would be shaded depending on what stage of delivery the service was. And that purely means it's available to your premises if you choose to use it. And one of the things that we find is a lot of people assume that fast broadband isn't available because their speeds haven't changed. That's because it won't change unless you speak to your service provider and ask them to change it for you. So if you're on a slower service and haven't spoken to your service provider, nothing will happen. So you do need A, to find out whether it's available, and then B, speak to the service provider and see whether they offer faster speeds, and if so, talk to them about upgrading your service. In most cases, the service providers will do so simply by putting you onto a new contract term. So depending on whether it's a consumer or business contract, that will usually be for either a new 12-month contract or it might be 18 months, 2 years, depending on whether it's consumer or a business contract. So do check, do speak to your service provider. On the OpenReach network at the moment, there are something over 100 providers with a huge range of different packages, and there are always a lot of offers available. So at the moment, for example, from the BT Business provider, they're currently offering a package, I think it's less than £20 a month, inclusive of unlimited calls. That package will be available for a while, and there'll be other packages from other providers. So there's a wide range of packages and price points for businesses and similarly for consumers. You can, on the OpenReach site, find out what providers are currently offering service. All these links are in the slides, which will be circulated as we mentioned earlier. So if you click on that link, then it will give you a list of providers. You can then click on their logos and find out what packages are available if your current ISP doesn't offer services, or you want to have a look and see what else is available out there. If you're in one of the sort of 2 or 3% of premises which aren't, that don't currently have fibre broadband available and aren't in our commercial plans to add it over the next 18 months or so, we'll certainly have a conversation if there's a group of businesses or residents that want service. OpenReach will still invest. It simply means that if you're not in a commercial build programme, it's not cost effective to provide the service without a contribution locally. Again, there's a link in the slides which explains that, but basically OpenReach will still invest to provide service to your premises. If there's a group of people, so for example, if it's businesses, if it's say landlords, or if there's a bid by looking at a co-investment approach, where for example, the Business Improvement District tops up the available investment from OpenReach in order to deliver the service. So that's an option if you don't currently have service and if you're not in the investment plans. And those are the links, again, including a bit more detail on what I've just covered. So very briefly, that's it. And one final point, in terms of coverage in the Park Royal area specifically, the West London Business team gave us a list of postcodes which mainly cover Park Royal, and there are about 4,500 premises within those postcodes that currently do have access to fibre broadband on the Openreach network. You'd need to go to the other providers to find what level of coverage there will be on those, but as I say, within the sort of the Park Royal postcodes, over 4,500 premises currently connected to Openreach.
Thanks. Right. So thanks, Andrew. My name is Phil Clapperson. I'm the Regional Sales Director for a company called Velocity One. So where Andrew's just been talking to you about the BT Openreach network, we're a broadband provider who doesn't work on the Openreach network. We have looked at an alternative way of trying to provide broadband to the Park Royal and Brent area. So that's a very, very brief introduction to Velocity One. We were established in 2011, and we were primarily established to provide fibre broadband services to the redevelopment of the Wembley Park area. So you're all familiar with what's going on up at Wembley Stadium and the development there with the London Designer Outlet and the new houses being built and new office blocks. So Velocity One was set up in conjunction with Quintain to provide a fibre broadband service to that area. We are currently still doing that. We have the ability to provide fibre broadband to every home, fibre broadband directly to the premises, to every home, to every business in the London Designer Outlet and to every business in the York House offices. And as the build out continues, we will continue to provide broadband there as well. And we also provide Wi-Fi services, so to the centre, to the London Designer Outlet, and also we provide external Wi-Fi down at Olympic Way and Olympic Boulevard. So as you get off the train at Wembley Park to come to the London Designer Outlet or for a match, etc., you could pick up a Wi-Fi service as you walk down Olympic Way and then also onto Wembley Boulevard, making Wembley more of a destination rather than people just arriving at an hour before kick-off or an hour before the event starts. We're trying to encourage people to hang around Wembley before events. We're also currently one of the 3 providers of connectivity to Amazon in both the UK and Europe, so not only Wembley but also some large data centres. And why I'm here to talk to you specifically was that in 2014 we launched in conjunction with the Super Connected Voucher Programme a wireless service. So we took our infrastructure that we have in Wembley and we identified that there were holes in the network availability of broadband in the Brent and Park Royal area. And so what we did was we installed some aerials on the roof of York House initially, and we've now expanded that to a number of other locations to provide a wireless broadband service to businesses in this particular area. And I'll talk more about that later on. We currently have 100 plus customers in the Park Royal area enjoying speeds of 70 plus megabits of broadband via this service. So just to quickly talk about the Wembley service again, because we're very proud of this and think it's something that the area is great benefiting from. As I mentioned, this is Wembley and this is Olympic Way. So if you get off the train and you go towards Wembley, we have various external Wi-Fi points here and also outside here and in this play area here, as demonstrated by the map. And people, when you arrive and you come to Wembley, you can actually log on to this Wi-Fi service and enjoy high-speed Wi-Fi while you're waiting for your match to start or while you're just coming to the shopping centre. And we see between 1,000 and 1,500 users on a non-match day using that service. So again, this is something we'd be keen to roll out into other locations as the regeneration of this area continues. We currently provide 1 gig broadband to residents in the Wembley Park area, which has garnered some interesting press coverage over the last sort of 6 to 12 months, where we got great coverage for providing services. So this is the newest block that's being built in the Wembley Park area. It's called Emerald Gardens. And when you move into that, people are moving in at the end of this month. When they move in, they will be availing of 1 gig broadband directly to their houses. So very, very fast broadband services. So bringing it right back down to Park Royal again, so what I was initially here to talk about. So as I mentioned, we have 3 high sites around the Park Royal Wembley area. So our offices are just up here. So we put a service here initially, and then we rolled out a couple more, which gives us coverage of roughly this area from a wireless broadband service. So it doesn't rely on any infrastructure in the ground or anything else like that. As long as your building can see one of these high sites, we can give you 70 megs broadband right now, today. And how do we do that? Well, here are some pictures of the type of installations that we do. So we would erect either via a mast such as this, or on the side of the building a little aerial. We would then run a cable from that aerial to your communications room, where we provide you with a modem or a router, and that then will be connected to your network. And as you can see here, and again these slides will obviously be presented, but I'm giving you some examples of people who've been installed and getting around 70 megs of broadband right now. These businesses previously were getting about 2 to 3 megs worth of broadband, so this has been transformational for those businesses in regards to broadband services. I'll give you an example. There's a specific company, East West Merchandise, in a industrial estate, and they sell handbags and things, and they used to have to do a data upload, and they used to have to do it overnight, and they used to have to start it very early in the afternoon to get it done by the next day. They now do it in the space of about 10 minutes, so it's really transformational for them. Just another service that we provide, because of the fact that we provide this broadband service, we can also provide a cloud-based phone service. So I demonstrate here that you can now put your landline in the bin. You no longer need a telephone line, because the service that Velocity offer is a cloud-based phone service. Some of you may have come across this before, but what this enables you to do is, this is actually a picture of me, of my phone, which is normally on my PC, and then we also have an app on our mobile phone. So if you are out of the office for whatever reason, you're travelling or you're working from home or whatever, you can still make and receive telephone calls either via your PC or via an app on your smartphone, and it looks like you're still in the office. Again, myself and my colleagues, James and Emmanuel, will be pleased to talk to you about that after the presentation if you have any more questions on that. Our service is a license-based service, and it provides free calls to the UK, USA and Ireland, and 18 other international destinations. So for one licence, you can get all of your calls covered. So what do we charge for this service? Well, our broadband services start at £45 per month, and our voice services start at £20 per licence. And again, we'd be more than happy to talk to you afterwards in regards to any questions you have about that. And then in regards to the future, so just along with everybody else here, we're very heavily involved in the OPDC conversation to ensure that, and as was previously mentioned, you know, the vision is to have a smart cities kind of environment here, and so that will require or necessitate the need for fibre to be laid, obviously everywhere as part of this development, and so we will be very heavily involved in that to ensure that that's the case. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm the final act. I'm sure you're after a coffee, but just wait a few more minutes. We appreciate it. So my name is Phil Hack. I'm Head of Strategic Projects for UK Power Networks. So here we go. There's the logo. So just in case you don't know who UK Power Networks is, we have just over 8 million connected customers. We're not a monopoly business running the electricity infrastructure for East of England, London and South East. In terms of new connections, which I guess is what we're sort of talking about, we have about 131,000 new connections every year. And I guess the most interesting stat on this slide is we've got 25%, we're talking about embedded generation. This is local generation in the communities. We've got 25% of the industry of embedded generation, that's 3 gigawatts, which is a quite impressive number, and that's since over the last 5 years. So that's a real change in terms of what we're doing. In terms of how we're organised and how we're managed, if you like, we are a monopoly. The regulator, Ofgem, obviously makes sure we do things in the right way. There's a new regulatory framework came out just over a year ago a year ago called Rio, and it's all about focusing on outputs, strong incentives on performance, and making sure we deliver strong customer and stakeholder engagement. And I guess it's one of those types of events, and it's down to us as management to deliver that. In terms of our strategy overall, it is about keeping things safe. Obviously, electricity can be dangerous if it's not used in the right way. That is our number one priority for our staff and obviously the public. Delivering great service to communities, that's I guess an obvious one, although as a monopoly, I'm sure some companies forget that they are there for a reason, that's serving the communities. We have 77 outputs that we've agreed with the regulator, which is across the things I've just mentioned, keeping the lights on. If they do go off, get them on quickly, providing good customer service when they call us, and responding to connections. So if your business requires a new supply, increased supply, to respond to those requests in a proper way. In terms of innovation, and I mentioned that this new distributed generation activity that's happening across the UK. For us, we are one of the most innovative companies in this space in the UK and delivering the most innovation projects to try and help the transition to a low carbon economy. And internally, we have this best in class by 2018. There's a number of D&O groups of companies like the ones I showed you on the previous slide. Our ambition is to be the leading of those in 2018. In terms of how we're performing overall, this is over the last 5 years. In terms of safety, I mentioned right up front, in 2010, 2011, about 33 people went home, not in the way they turned up to work that day. So they had a day off work because of an injury at work. That's a shocking stat. It's a reality, and actually we've brought that down over the last 5 years to around 5. I think we've had one so far this year, since January. In terms of what most people are interested in, as businesses and I guess domestic use of energy, and that's about power cuts. And since 2010, we have two main measures. One is called customer interruptions, that's a power cut. So in 2010, 60 out of 100,000 customers, there will be 66 of those would have an interruption. Now, we're down to 39. So we've nearly halved the number of power cuts you are likely to have on average for your business in the last 5 years. In terms of customer minutes lost, that's the measure of if you go off, how long you're off for. Okay, so again, back in 2010, average customer minutes lost. If you went off, you'd be off on average for 64 minutes. Now, if you went off, you'd be off on average for 30 minutes. So again, over the last 5 years, we're absolutely focused on reducing the number of customer interruptions, power cuts to you and me. And if you do have a power cut, we get you back on as quickly as possible. And I guess that's a fairly important statistic for businesses and I guess as us as domestic customers as well. But it does come at a cost. We're a monopoly, and if you didn't appreciate, a bit of your electricity bill, whether it's a business or a domestic customer, a bit of your bill goes to whoever your service provider is, your energy supplier, and a bit of that makes its way to UK Power Networks. And you can see here, in terms of, this is for domestic customers, but I think the sentiment's the same. We are, we're just, circa £80 a year of your electricity bill as a domestic customer comes to us to make sure that the electricity network, the infrastructure, is there and we respond to power cuts. Compared to the other D&Os, the distribution network companies you'll see there. In terms of service, so this is around, if you do go off and you decide to phone us, more and more people are not picking up the phone when they have a power cut. More and more people will send us, look at Facebook, Twitter, send us a tweet, they'll look at the website to see outages, and I appreciate sometimes your router might not work, but in some cases you will still have access to the internet, perhaps via a mobile phone company. But customer service is all about the quality of that service. And again, you'll see, over the last few years, we've gone from 7.6 out of 10 to 8.5 out of 10. 8.5, 85% customer service score is not bad, bearing in mind most customers phone us or contact us when the electric's gone off. And so if your electric's gone off, you're probably not particularly happy when it's coming back on. But on average, and that's both power cuts but also connection requests. So if you request a new connection to your business or home, then obviously that intervention requires you to potentially be surveyed by the regulator, and that's the score that comes out of that process. It's called Board Measure of Customer Service. In the meantime, We've now, for 2 years, in 2012 and 2015, won Utility of the Year. For the second year running, we've achieved the Sunday Times top 25 big companies to work for. So whilst we've had this massive transformation over the last 5 years to help you and your businesses to operate hopefully properly, we're also doing it, bringing our people along as part of that process. In terms of what's happening in our sector overall, I've mentioned a couple of these already. So in terms of change, and I've been here 29 years this September. I joined as an apprentice from the bottom and worked my way up. And over the last probably 5 years, and I've just recruited 3 new graduates starting in September. And I've said to these guys, actually this is about as exciting as our industry gets in terms of the amount of change that's happening. So we're seeing a massive increase in distributed generation and local energy storage. As we mentioned a couple of times, I'll talk about that in a moment in case you don't quite understand what that means. There's the rollout of smart meters. You may have a smart meter in your home or in your business to understand exactly in near real time how much energy you're consuming. Also domestically, micro generation and micro storage. You possibly picked up that Tesla are developing a battery that you put in your house. So if you've got PV or solar panels on the roof, you can charge your own battery and your own and use your own electricity, which is obviously really useful in terms of keeping your bills down. And obviously we've spoken a bit about the electrification of heat. So at the moment, most, I guess if you've got a gas supply in your home, you're typically heating your house with gas, but we are seeing a massive electrification of heat and of transport networks. I guess what I've not heard much of today in terms of the overall plans is the use of electric vehicles and other transport around the new development sites that are happening over in this part of London. Just in terms of the final one here, customers' expectations are massively changing. I remember in the early days, if electricity went off if you were in somewhere rural, you know, that'd be, we know it's difficult, get it back on when you can, sort of thing. Nowadays, they want an Amazon Prime type service. You know yourself, if you order something and you can't get next day delivery, whether it's my wife ordering something from Next or me getting some other bit of tech off Amazon Prime, if I don't get it next day, I'm thinking, oh, that's a bit rubbish. So actually, the expectations of our customers are exactly the same when they take a service from someone like us, UK Power Networks. In terms of exactly what's going on, we are driven by customers. So the way we're regulated means we can't look at some of these regeneration projects and go, okay, let's just roll out a massive network, a big pipe, if you like, to make sure it's there just in case the new developers decide they want a large energy connection. The way we're regulated, because if we do it, that would mean everybody, all of us, would have to pay a bit more on our electricity bill just in case. So the way we're regulated is effectively the developer has to request the connection, we'll support them in that process, and then they obviously pay us and then we do the work. That's to make sure that the buyer pays, if you like. So what we have to do, we're driven by demand. So we're working with our colleagues that were speaking earlier around these major schemes. So in terms of, these are just some in West London. I've looked at overall the West London Business Group look at, in terms of the main schemes and the size of projects we're working on. So White City Opportunity Area, that's a 40 MVA mega volt ampere, that's a big 132 stroke 11,000 kVA substation. That's about as big as they get for us as a distribution network operator. You've got the National Grid, who operate at 400,000 volts, that's the big transmission lines, but for what we do, we're putting one new major substation in for White City. In terms of the OPDC area, that's 3 new 132 to 11 kV substations. This is major infrastructure. I think we saw that very greyed out picture of Stratford anyway, the big substation in Stratford. That big grey building was 132 kV site. We're looking to put 3 of those on the OPDC development area. Just in terms of some other, I guess, reasonably close development sites, we've got Earls Court, 2 132 kV substations, and in Brent Cross, Cricklewood, 3 33 kV substations. These are large infrastructure. So when you see roadworks and it says working on behalf of UK Power Networks, and I do the same, you think you're frustrated because you're stuck in traffic or there's traffic lights or something, and you say, oh, what they're doing now? Actually, what they're doing is responding to customers' demands to install bigger supplies to allow them to grow their businesses. So we do appreciate it can be very inconvenient. We do work with the local authorities, and we have to, we're obviously delivering these requests on behalf of customers, equipping people like you in this room in terms of new connections or new supplies that you need. But our role is regulated. We have to do what we're told. We try to do it in the right way, and I think I've showed you some of the slides in terms of how we're trying to manage and improve that performance. But for us, it's about if you do require, and we've started these conversations obviously with the OPDC, is talk to us early. The earlier you talk to us, we can look to see how we can optimise bringing not only your new supplies, but potentially other developers' new supplies in on the same route and try to coordinate as best we can. People say to us, we've just resurfaced the road, we've just relayed the road, the local authority, and then you've come in and just dug it all up again. What a waste of time. Why don't you better coordinate it? In a lot of cases, we have to respond. Yes, we do have an 8-year plan in terms of our own improve and upgrade of our own assets. But if a new developer says, I want a new major development, a new site, then we have to respond to that as you would expect us to, which unfortunately sometimes requires us to dig up the roads which perhaps weren't that frequently just relayed. But we do coordinate as best we can, but we are driven by customers' requirements as well. In terms of, we also have a division called UK Panel Services, so they're unregulated. So we have the regulated business, the public network, and then we have the unregulated business. You'll recognise some of those logos. So we finance, we maintain, renew and upgrade private networks. So in terms of some of the businesses that you represent, you may have a private electricity network. We do it for Heathrow, so all the high voltage energy infrastructure for Heathrow Airport is owned and operated by us. HS1, we'll speak about HS2 earlier. Again, we own the energy infrastructure privately for the operation and maintenance of that. Canary Wharf, we have a small office in Canary Wharf where we operate and maintain the high voltage energy infrastructure for that site. And we have multi-utility capabilities, and we do a huge amount of work for Network Rail, the Great Western Electrification Programme, and various other projects, and London Underground, and various other light railway projects as well. So we do have a private businesses division as well. So I thought I'd give them a plug while I'm here. And there you go. There you go.
So lots to soak up there, but I'm sure you've got lots of questions to ask. So I'm going to take 2 questions, and then we'll turn to the panel.
I wanted to ask Phil Hack a question. So he doesn't feel he's being ambushed. I represent a landlord in Park Royal. The 2 questions I've got is, the first one is, how confident are you that there is the power in the network for the OPDC and also Park Royal? Because Park Royal has got a lot of food occupiers and they use an awful lot of power. My second question is mobilisation. We've had a rather bruising experience with a power supply company, I'm not going to mention any names, and it was in terms of mobilisation, and we think that there needs to be looked at something to do with mobilisation of people.
Thank you. And Derek, your question.
Hi, my name's Derek, mine is from Beyond. Phil, electric cars, there are a lot of discussions, a lot of excitement. If you listen to Elon Musk, it's all going to happen in 3 years, but it may happen in the next 10 years. But what are your plans for charging infrastructure?
Okay, I'll take the first one first. You might have to remind me, but I'll take the first question. So the best thing you can do is engage early. So we've started conversations with the regeneration group to start to think about, and you heard earlier about how many 2 kilowatts per house on average. Now, I used to be designer and connect or consumer. You shouldn't have to worry about whether there's enough power. The best thing you can do is engage with us early, talk about what your plans are. It's down to us to work with the National Grid to basically agree with them the points. Those 132 kV substations that I spoke about earlier, that's the very start of a conversation in terms of what we think broadly at this stage we're going to require. In terms of mobilisation, the old Oak Common plans are over the next 35 years, I think someone said. But the way we build our network needs to be built in and it was a bit higher than that. Now that requirement for housing is coming down. So the earlier you talk to us, the better we can come up with a plan. In terms of is there enough power, there needs to be enough power in a way that we can grow and develop it. It's no good us getting sort of 20% through and saying, oh no, that plan's wrong, we need to start a new plan. So we need to have the overall game plan, and I think we're starting to see the start of that in terms of what that looks like. And then we can start to look at how we build our network to make sure we can create the capacity. So It's no good taking a very small site and think, oh, that will meet today's requirements all for the next 5 or 10 years. And then before you know it, the next refrigeration retailer, food retailer, whatever comes online, they need another 10 MVA. I think, oh, okay, we need to start again. We need to have that in mind. So I think the fact that we're having these very early conversations means we can start to think about, well, okay, in the short term it's going to be, I don't know, 20 MVA. Within 10 years it's going to be a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. In terms of mobilisation, I mean, there's 6,000 employees work for UK Power Networks, and plus our contractors. So again, with a decent plan, we're able to mobilise and deliver that work for our customers. And ultimately, we have to, because there are set timescales we need to deliver that we're on point for by the regulator to make sure we deliver. And if we're failing that, then you need to be speaking to us and you need to be escalating it with us. And I'll be happy to have a conversation with your specific experiences and see if you've got the right contacts in our organisation, so you know, yes, you'll have the day-to-day contacts, but you will also know how to escalate these things, because sometimes, you know, it's perhaps the project management level and they're perhaps not fully aware of exactly what's going on. In terms of
Sorry, can I just come back?
Yeah.
In terms of the national grid,
Yeah.
do you have early conversations with them about what power you want to reserve off the grid?
Yeah, absolutely. So, effectively, we agree with them where these points are going to be. So we'll say to them, well, actually, we want to upgrade this particular point. It's their role to look at whether they have to. And there's a potential, but I think it's, and I'm not an expert in grid. I could brought someone with me who may know a bit more about it, but or perhaps next time bring a guy from grid in. But potentially, generally, we wouldn't have to upgrade the 400 kV network. It's generally the 132 kV network. Our network that we have to upgrade to meet the requirements of something like this redevelopment.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of electric vehicles is really exciting for us, but it's taken a bit of time. So we have some experts in our team that have been working with Transport for London actually and deploying some charging posts, etc. So we've got some experience of that. What's going to be interesting, particularly at sites like this, is the logistics companies. So soon, if you want to provide logistics vehicles in London, again you need to meet the next threshold of emissions. And a lot of companies are trying to think about how they move to electric vehicles. One of the biggest problems is actually, and this is both buses and also vans, etc. One of the biggest problems is these logistics companies are very used to leasing these vehicles. They do it all the time. And so leasing an electric vehicle, the business model's not going to be much different. But it could potentially cost them several £1 million to upgrade the electricity infrastructure to allow them to charge their 100 electric vans every night. So actually, again, we're having a few conversations with some companies to say, well, actually, is there a way of us upgrading the energy infrastructure in a way, and it'll be through a commercial relationship as opposed to a public relationship in terms of public network, where we could potentially come up with something where a company can change its fleet to electric vehicles to allow that transition. In terms of domestic, your and our electric vehicle, that's where, particularly where you've got a large scheme, people will still have cars. You know, the ambition that they won't have cars, you know, is still a while away. For the housing particularly, that's how we build that infrastructure into the site. So, you know, whether it's underground car parks or roadside parking, I don't know what the detailed plans are, but actually, again, engaging early to allow us to install potentially charging infrastructure to allow that connection. Interestingly though, these new electric vehicles have a really large demand. These aren't just a 3-pin plug anymore, because you want your vehicle charged within half an hour or a couple of hours. Actually, that means that's a big thick cable, if you imagine it, that's connected to the vehicle. And if everybody got in at 6 o'clock at night and plugged their vehicle in on today's infrastructure, that's a challenge for us. We need to be designing that sort of technology in from the start. So, you know, whether it's people's vehicles say, well, I need a 2-hour charge, but as long as it's charged by 6 o'clock in the morning, I don't care when it does it. And putting that smart city technology in. So actually, we'll do house number 3, they'll come on at 2 o'clock in the morning. House number 4 will come on at 4 o'clock in the morning. He doesn't need his charge till 10 o'clock. We'll charge his vehicle up a bit later. And actually, it's making sure we design in that sort of smart city type technology now, as opposed to, you know, in 10 years' time.
Thank you. Probably got time for one more round of questions before we turn to Rahul, and hopefully Victoria Hills has made her way to the traffic to give it, share closing sort of reflections. I think perhaps a focus on broadband particularly. So
Yeah, question for Andrew. You mentioned that 4,500 premises within the Park Royal area were covered by Openreach. Is that correct?
Yeah, but on the fibre broadband.
On the fibre broadband. So how many are not connected?
Unfortunately, when I was looking at the data for that, we don't have an accurate count of the total number of premises in those postcode areas. So we're going to need to do a little bit more work to give us a better percentage coverage. But what I would say, if you like, the important thing anyway is if it was 99.9% coverage and you're in the 0.1%, you're not going to be especially interested that yours is the only premise that's on Park Royal. So the important thing is to look on the site and find out whether you've got access, as opposed to whether there are 4,500 others.
Well, see, the issue I have is that businesses contact me, and it seems that Openreach have made a deliberate attempt to avoid cabling industrial estates and to focus way more on residential estates, and that's why that number is so high, above 90%, because the number of premises on a road is, or a street, or a residential street, is far more than on an industrial estate. But we have, you know, Park Royal, the bedrock of it are small and medium-sized businesses, nearly 2,500 of them, and a large quantity of those are not covered by an Openreach connection. Whereas, as you correctly point out, large swathes of Brent, of Ealing, of Hammersmith and Fulham are covered from a residential perspective. Now, I appreciate sometimes the cost economics of going to a industrial estate might not justify Openreach looking at it in as favourable a way as they look at a residential street. However, it's proving to be a major roadblock to the business community over here. So can you speak to why that is the case?
So that's a myth, to be honest. When we look at where to invest, we don't make any differential between whether it's business or residential premises. So in our evaluation of an area, it's the same calculation, because actually from an Openreach point of view, don't take this the wrong way, but a business or a consumer is worth the same, because a service provider pays
But a house is usually much smaller than a industrial premise.
Well, yeah, so when we're doing an evaluation of an area, it's literally a straightforward commercial calculation. Is there a potential return on investment? And for our commercial investment, that's over 12 years. And in London, we're investing everywhere where we can see a return on investment in that period, whether it's commercial or residential. But equally, as I said, for any area that doesn't meet that criteria, we're still happy to look at investment and to do that jointly with the residents or businesses. We are doing that with a number of landlords of business parks, for example. So I think there's some bids where we're doing that. I know with Seagrow, not in Park Royal, but certainly in Slough, we're doing some co-investment. So we're happy to look at options if it isn't commercially viable for Openreach.
But the thing with it, and again, with my Park Royal head on here, Park Royal is not a series of defined owner-managed industrial estates. There are some, for sure, but Park Royal is also quite a distributed, owner-managed kind of light industrial area where there isn't that level of coordination of us coming together and a single landlord coming to Openreach and saying, here, we are a community, come to us. And I have multiple examples that have been made aware to me of industrial areas such as that, where residential streets just opposite are fully connected, but the industrial parks are not, and there is no clear roadmap to making that happen.
Well, as I say, we're investing further anyway. The coverage is already quite high in the three boroughs, and that will include business premises, not just residential premises. But if there are specific businesses that are not covered in our current coverage or plans, there's still the option of co-investing. Now, yes, you'll need to then organise with other, if it's owner-occupiers, with others to make that worthwhile. But also don't forget what I said, which is people tend to focus specifically on broadband, and actually for medium and large businesses, there are far better options available that are much better suited, much more resilient.
And that's true, but Park Royal, you must understand, the bread and butter of Park Royal are the 2,000 odd small to mid-sized businesses. And the large businesses are already connected through their lease lines or their business internet.
Medium-sized businesses should be looking at services other than broadband. There are much better services, good value for money, which give them far more options, far more flexibility, far more resilience, which people tend to forget, with those services. And as I said, as a genuine price point, the sort of cost of those services, you can easily find those for around the equivalent of buying 4 coffees a day. So these are not out of the reach of a medium-sized business.
Yeah, it feels like something we're going to have to pick up
We'll take
on
it up, yeah.
offline, but I think certainly the community fibre partnerships model sounds an interesting one, perhaps one for us to pick up on. And I think as Rahul says, there is a reality where a lot of businesses, particularly 5 staff, which is micro enterprises, where clearly there could be a fit. Any other questions?
Just a quick one really. When you're engaging with a community such as Park Roy, do you not think it would be helpful for a bit of straight speak, and it's been in the news recently about broadband speeds? You know, I bet everyone in this room probably thinks they've got a 50 meg connection. I've got a 50 meg connection. The actual download speeds are 10% of that. Do you think in terms of industry speak, do you not think when you're going to switch across to that, because it would help businesses make their calculations or plans if they knew what actual speeds they were getting rather than the marketing speed that we see?
So again, I don't accept that. If any service that you buy, if it's a broadband service, at the point you buy it, the provider should give you an estimate of the speed to your premises. So by the time you sign a contract, you should not be under any illusion what speed you will get to your premises. If you choose a contract and it turns out the speed is different to that, you've got the right of cancellation. So anyone that enters into a contract now, and this has been true for the last probably about 2 years, that should not be an issue. You should be very clear what performance to expect from your connection. And frankly, if you are talking to an ISP about contracting for a new service, if they don't offer you an estimate, then ask for it. And I wouldn't sign a contract until I got it.
Yeah, why not to expect? It's been the same for the last 25 years. But I have a 50 meg PT connection and it downloads at 4.5 to 5.
So
No, but why is it?
Hang on, if you've had it for that long, you haven't got a 50 meg service. An ADSL service has a top speed of technically about 20 megabits. We've only introduced the fibre services in the last about 4 or 5 years. So you wouldn't have had it for 20 years at that speed.
I just think it would help the industry.
And in terms of the average speed capability of the fibre services, for that type of connection, the national average speed for those services, if it's not capped for a contract, is about 65 megabits, something around that. But as I say, averages are interesting. What you want to know is the speed to your premise. The service provider should give you that before you sign a contract. If they don't sign the contract.
Useful tip. I think we're going to leave the questions there. Huge thank you to our panel. Lots of interesting insights. And if I may, so one last start, I'll put your hands together and we're then going to switch over.